in conjunction with a series of lessons given by a qualified teaching professional.
Oh yeah, get the motor running. I've been everything all my life.
We're going to apply a very standard golf swing evaluation program to an exceptional golf swing. Let's see how it comes out. We're starting with a rectangle. If the head stays easily within the rectangle through the moment of impact, we have a good measure of balance. In this player's backswing motion, we see his head lift up. This is very typical in good golf swings, to see some lift of the head in the backswing. In transition, we see the head moving toward the target. In a normal golf swing, this would be a detrimental move. At the moment of impact, the player's head is more than 3 inches closer to the target than it was at address. The head now moves considerably out of the rectangle in the through swing and finish, which is acceptable. It appears as though the causes for the player's head to move forward in the downswing are, number one, a very wide stance, and number two, he seems to be exaggerating his tilt away from the target in his address position. We're looking for good shoulder action in both directions, and we're going to use these dots at the shoulders to help us measure that action. We stop the player's swing halfway, and we can see that he has about 80 degrees of shoulder turn, which is correct. We can also see at the halfway point, when the left arm is parallel to the ground, that the shaft of the club is not perpendicular to the ground as it should be. The player needs to moderate somewhat in the area of hand action in the early part of the swing in order to create this very important right angle. At the top of the swing, he shows a full turn of 90 degrees. In the downswing, through swing and finish, we're looking for another full turn of the shoulders where the right shoulder smoothly passes the left in the through swing and finish for a total of about 200 degrees of turn. The player's shoulder turn seems to fall about 10 degrees shy of full, and the full turn is disallowed by a very closed lower body stance. As the player stands up to the ball more parallel left of the target, I think we're going to see him turn through to a full finish. At the top of the backswing, a line drawn at the back tilts about 5 degrees away from the target, which is very correct. Notice that at the moment of impact, the player has about a 7-degree tilt. This also exceptionally correct. The player finishes with a rather vertical spine, which is a matter of preference. This diagonal line along the right leg will help us to measure lower body balance during the backswing. There should be no crossover or pull away from this line during the backswing motion. In this player's swinging action, we see a very good turning motion on the right leg, a strong feature of the player's swing system. Just a very slight bowing of the right knee in the course of the backswing. Otherwise, a very strong move on the right leg. Excellent leg drive through the moment of impact. Just a slight interruption in the flow of motion of the lower body in the through swing. The wide stance, and as we will see shortly in the program, a very closed lower body position is interfering with the flow of motion into the finish. The dots at the knees will help us to further evaluate leg action throughout the swing. We're looking for early, independent, lateral motion of the left knee. There it is. It occurred in the 9th frame of progress, and this is a very timely bit of leg work. In the average good golf swing, we see independent lateral motion from the left knee occurring in the 7th, 8th, or 9th frame, just as seen here. Now we can see the slight bow of the right knee. At the top of the swing, the right knee had moved from its starting position by about 1.5 inches, possibly 2 inches. Ideal would be if the right knee held its starting position to the top of the backswing. In the downswing, we're looking for a uniform leg drive, a flow of motion by both knees toward the target through the moment of impact. In this player's downswing motion, we see that flow, although there is some deceleration of the left knee travel just before impact. As the player improves the lower body alignment, possibly narrows his stance slightly, we're going to see even more effectiveness in the area of leg drive toward the target. A straight vertical line upward from the ball will help us to evaluate body position and ball position at address. With a wooden club and the player does have a driver, the hands should be positioned directly over the club head, behind, but adjacent to this evaluation line. This player's hands are too far behind the line, and the cause here is a unique position of address. The player's club head is placed more than 1 foot away from the ball. The line should have continued upward and just about run through the left shoulder socket. Again, the peculiar nature of the player's stance disallows this positioning so that the line runs through the left shoulder. I think the player needs to narrow his stance in both directions, both from the right and the left side. He appears to need to stand just a little taller in the process, possibly flex his knees just a little bit more. Otherwise, he would have a very good position of address, especially if he placed the club head in a more conventional way directly behind the ball. We've marked the center of this player's swing, that center being between the two shoulders and under the chin, and now we're moving the player's swing to the moment of impact, where we will remark that same center. Ideally, the two marks should fall one on top of the other. Here we can see that the second marking is considerably forward of and lower than the first. If the player set up to the ball as suggested by the graphics on the screen, and then made the same good turning motion on the right leg into the backswing, I believe he would have an easier time getting these two dots to properly fall one on top of the other, while simultaneously creating a more efficient golf swing. It's hard to say that this swing could be more efficient. There are so many good features about it. Here's a look at the rhythm factor of this player's swing. We're going to establish time lapse in 3 consecutive moments. They are the moments of set, turn, and swing. The settling moment being that moment just before takeaway, in which there is no body motion nor any clubhead motion. In this player's settling moment, we discovered a frame count of 6. This figure converts to exactly 1/5 of a second, since the machinery operates at the rate of 30 frames per second. It means that the player is spending a brief but acceptable moment motionless over the ball before takeaway. The turn moment is the backswing. In the player's turn moment, we found a much more rhythmic figure, but still slightly on the brief side, of 21 frames. The third and final moment is the swing moment. It is the downswing, through swing, and finish combined. A free-flowing motion, usually most indicative of a player's natural rhythm and pace. In the player's swing moment, we found an identical 21 frames. These figures of 21 indicate the player's very good instincts in the area of rhythm. Ideally, all 3 figures should be alike and probably somewhere around 22 or 23 frames per moment. If there were 322s, 323s, or 324s on the screen, there would be an indication not only of perfect rhythm, but perfect pace. The rectangle, once again, to help us to measure balance. Again, we're looking for the head to stay steady within the rectangle through the moment of impact. We can see the player's head lift up slightly, but we also see it pull away from the ball. The player might want to reposition himself at address so as to eliminate this pull away. We're going to see that the closed lower body contributes to this pull away motion. The drop down, possibly a little excessive, would be moderated somewhat as the player narrowed his stance just slightly. The player's head is out of the rectangle in the through swing and finish, which is acceptable. The 3 dots located at the right shoulder socket, the right knee joint, and the ball joint of the right foot should connect with a straight vertical line, indicating good alignment and good static balance. We do have a misconnection. The 2 causes here are 1, misalignment, and 2, the player is reaching for the ball a little bit too much. He needs to stand a little taller, flex his knees just a little more, and then get these 3 lines parallel to each other in order to effect a connection of the 3 dots. This diagonal line across the top of the shoulders to the ball will help us to evaluate swing plane. Plotting the backswing with blue dots and the downswing with yellow, we should see the 2 lines formed come together at the waist, then follow one on top of the other to the ball. None of the actions of this player's swing should take place to the right side of the evaluation line. Because of the reach for the ball and the very closed stance, the player produces a very inward move in takeaway. The upswing also too far behind him. He does not cross over the evaluation line. Reroutes his hands slightly in descent and establishes a different line to the ball with the club head. The downswing line also slightly too far behind him. The influences here are the closed nature of his stance and the reach for the ball. Coming on the screen again in blue is the ideal upswing path for the player's club head. Now in a reddish color, the ideal downswing. Just by better alignment and standing a little taller, the player can affect 50% of the changes suggested on the screen. Slightly improved hand action in the takeaway should put the club head dead on the more desirable track. Here's a close-up look at swing plane, and remember that in the area shown, the two lines formed should fall one on top of the other. If the player is to be consistent, we should see that two inward move. The reach for the ball and the closed stance are the principal causes. Now the return should be on a different, much closer to totally functional track, but still the downswing slightly too far behind the player. This player has terrific moves. We can see here especially the hands. He goes from a cupped left wrist position to a bowed left wrist position in the process of release. Terrific hand action. Also an excellent position of the right foot. The dark blue line once again represents the ideal upswing path, the reddish line the ideal downswing. In this series of pictures, we're plotting the action of the hands rather than the club head to see what influence the path of the hands has on the path of the club head. Because of the reach and the closed stance, the player's first move with the hands is too inward. The return on a different route, so hand swing plane definitely is influencing club head swing plane. A better setup, slightly improved hand action away from the ball should help to put the club head, or rather the hands, on the more desirable tracks, the dark blue for the upswing and the reddish line for the downswing. Notice the straight line on the diagonal with the second line falling directly on top of the first. This is what the player should be striving for in the way of hand playing. Again, we're plotting the action of the hands, this time to establish two arcs, one into the backswing, the other into the downswing. We're going to discuss the quality of each arc and the relationship of one to the other. What we are looking at are effects rather than causes, but sometimes imaging what one's hands do in an arcing way helps one toward improvement in other areas such as balance and plane. We see good circular characteristics to the upswing arc, and now very good circular characteristics to the downswing. But the two arcs are separated by too great an amount. Now we see at the bottom of the swing a very unusual feature. The hands are traveling on the same elevation for a very long distance, right through impact. This is an extraordinary feature of the player's swing. The dark blue line once again represents the ideal upswing, and the reddish line the ideal downswing. The player can affect the changes that are suggested by improving as far as the swaying motion in the downswing. The diagonal line along the right leg once again to measure lower body balance during the backswing. The circle of the left foot to draw attention to the actions of that foot throughout the swing. We should see the player make a good turn on the right leg into the backswing. Just a little more crossover of the line here than shown previously, but still a very good turning motion. He lifts his left heel about 3.5 inches, which is acceptable. Now we can see that he plants that left heel in 6 frames. I think if he narrowed his stance somewhat, that he'd be able to have slightly quicker action as far as that heel plant is concerned. In the average good golf swing, we see the left heel planting in 3 or 4 frames. The touchdown of that left heel occurred 6 frames before impact, while there are 7 frames in the player's downswing. So he has quite good foot action, very lively. If he planted his left heel in 5 frames instead of 6, he would then be touching down 7 frames before impact, or he would be touching down exactly at the top of his downswing. This would be perfect footwork. Perfect also is the position of the right foot at impact. Weight transferred mostly to the left side, off the inside edge of the right foot. The player needs to turn more into the finish. He can do this as he aligns himself better at address. The line at his back represents his spine at address. It is tilted just slightly too much away from the target. The line to the left of his image represents the suggestions of this program, a 5-degree tilt of the spine away from the target in the address position. The player appears to have about a 7-degree tilt, just slightly exaggerated. Almost immediately, he goes to a 5-degree tilt. By standing up slightly, he establishes a 5-degree tilt to the spine, and at the top of the swing, he maintains that 5-degree tilt. He is perfect as far as the angle of his spine from almost the outset of his swing. In the downswing, we see that he gets a slight recoil, but establishes a 7-degree tilt by the moment of impact. Very correct as far as the position of his spine at impact. This is a very strong feature of his swing system, the fact that he does essentially maintain his spine as a rotary axis throughout the swing. But of course, there are many strong features to this player's system. Another look at the actions of the player's spine. We can see the difference between the suggested to the left of the player's image and his spine position, just about 2 degrees. And we can see him go to the 5-degree tilt almost immediately after takeaway. At the top of the swing, he has the 5-degree tilt. With excellent leg action, he's going to establish a 7-degree tilt by the moment of impact. He shows potential for perfect action in the area of the spine. Slightly improved setup would help toward this end. This player has exceptional leg work, exceptional hand work, especially through impact, and the outstanding capability of maintaining his spine as a rotary axis. He may need some improvement in the area of setup. Better alignment, slightly narrower stance. Should help him to get more on track as far as the hands and club head are concerned. That is in the way of playing. We're going to add to this program by showing this player in some extraordinary positions from transition through impact into the finish. Here he is going through transition. Beautiful positions. Textbook perfect here and all the way to impact. Perfect position. The player's reputation as a ball striker is well-founded. It has been a pleasure and a privilege for this commentator to evaluate this player's swing.